When you think of God, you probably picture something like this, or any of these. But for those of you who believe in God, this is of course not what you believe God's nature to actually be. I mean, God is not really an old man in the sky, or an elephant, or a big elephant creature, but at the very least you believe God is something. And you would probably also agree that there has always been something to exist, and I agree with that as well, and I've left a proof of that in the description. Now, as God has always existed, God would be this something. Now, what can we validly say about God? I mean, what is God's nature actually like? Well, let's see what you all say. Okay, so looks like God is a supreme being. God is the creator of the universe, and yeah, so what can we get out of that? Well, not a whole lot, as it turns out. What's missing from that statement, supreme being, is what aspect God is actually supreme in. And that matters a lot because we don't really know anything about God, assuming we're looking up the definition. But I can tell you a few things about God's nature that you can logically derive from this definition. And we will start with a few premises. First of which is that if God is the creator of the universe, then it is implied that God's existence is separate from the universe. Second premise, if God exists separately from the universe, then God is not bound by time. And premise 3 is to desire something requires a cognitive process, and cognitive processes are bound by time for premise 4. Now, what can we conclude out of this? God cannot desire anything. Whatever God is, it is incapable of desire, or any cognitive or rational process for that matter. And from this conclusion, we already see many contradictions across nearly every holy text imaginable. God getting angry at humanity and then flooding the planet, just not possible. So perhaps a deistic God makes sense in this case. God simply set all of reality into motion and doesn't play an active role. But if this is the case, then what really is God? I mean, God is unnecessary, first of all, as the universe may very well be cyclical, and the something is simply everything that exists as a never-ending cycle. You, me, and everything we see has always existed, just in a different form. You see, God doesn't exist for a simple reason. God is a term that is simply undefined. Attempts at defining God lead to contradictions and incoherence, as you've seen. Maybe you got nothing out of this. Maybe you don't agree, and guess what? It doesn't matter anyways. Let's suspend disbelief and say that God exists and is all-knowing and all-powerful. And somehow, God is also capable of cognitive processes. Well, this would mean that God created all of reality with the knowledge of what we would do, and he also had the ability to not create everything this way. Therefore, everything that exists, such as our mechanism of making decisions, is determined by God. And because of God's omnipotence, we cannot do anything he doesn't will. And no, he doesn't allow things either. Think about it, what would God be allowing? This would imply that there is something that God didn't create that is capable of action. But God created everything, so that's impossible. Simply by existing, you are already fulfilling God's will. This doesn't really change anything if you think about it. It just means that actions done for the sake of God and only God serve no purpose, because it's not possible for you to not do anything for God's sake. And this means that even the idea of God serves no real purpose, does it?